Hey, Amaya. There. There's a very beautiful Roxanne in a nice, comfortable bed. So this conversation with Kevin, who I love talking to, was recorded about 10 days ago, and I rewatched it yesterday, and it's strange how quickly my thinking moves on. I spend all day really just reading and walking and thinking about this whole thing, the stuff I'm talking about and what's happened over the last year, really. But if I go into that here, it'll just end up being a super long intro. So I'll save that for my solo video, which I shall try and get done next week. And so enjoy this conversation. It's just us talking about our experiences, and unfortunately, the time difference, because Kev's in Australia, I think the time difference is about 10 hours. So the only time we can really speak is evening for him and early morning for me. So unfortunately, I'm always supercharged with coffee and quite often brandy. So I think I dominated this conversation a little bit, and he was very gracious and very generous with allowing me to sort of say my bit. I think he's in a much kind of more stable place, really. I'm constantly changing, constantly kind of, seems like I'm constantly transforming, and so I'm pushing the envelope of my feelings and my kind of self-knowledge, and so I've always got a lot more to say, and bless him, he's very gracious. So we're going to keep doing these conversations, and hopefully you'll see an evolution in what we talk about. And I love talking to him because he kind of pulls me back a little bit as well, because I can be a little cruel to myself sometimes. And he's very good humoured and has a kind of more tolerant, broader perspective than I do. Okay, so enjoy this. I hope you do, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye.
Good.
I think you found out making your video that
so much harder than it looks.
It's
so much harder than it looks.
It's really difficult. So did you see my last video when I was on top of the hill?
The one where you're overlooking the landscape, or the one where you're like, I'm waiting for the weather.
Yeah. No, the one where I was up looking over the landscape. So I went up there in the morning and just did that in one take and just nailed it. And then I had this beautiful spot where I thought, right, I'm going to go there and make the next video. And it's a round trip of 10 miles to get there. So I cycle and then I walk. And so now from making videos that you can't just say to yourself, right, I'm going to go there on that day at that time and say everything I want to say. You just can't do it like that. So I've been because the weather's been really bad, I've had a few, like 2 or 3 windows where I could go there and make it there in time so that I didn't get rained off, and I had like an hour or 2 window in the weather to make a video and come back. First time I went there was on, I think it was Monday, or Sunday or Monday. I went there and the weather was fine. Got there in good time, but there were people there because it was the weekend and it's a really beautiful place. So I had to abandon that one. And then I went there the next day, woke up, had a coffee really early and cycled there as the sun came up. Got there and I hiked up this hill, and I stood there, and it's the most spectacular view I have ever seen in my life. But because I've just got a GoPro, it just doesn't do it justice. And it's just this kind of thing in the distance. I thought, oh God, what am I going to do? Found a really beautiful spot, sat there, laid out my notes. And then I realized, because I've been trying to make this video for like 2 weeks, my thoughts had evolved. and it feels wrong to do it with notes anyway, because it feels rehearsed. It doesn't feel like spontaneously truthful. And so I sat there for about 2 hours and I thought, I'm not going to do this. So I sat and just, watched the water and the trees and came up with an idea about what I should say. So abandoned that, went back yesterday for the third time, sat there, and I just couldn't get to what it was I was trying to say. So I came back, and yesterday afternoon, the weather cleared again. So I went up the hill, tried again, didn't work. So I had one last go this morning, and it just didn't work. So I'll have another go later. But it's funny because you can't, because you're trying to say something from really deep inside that actually is true. It's a
very Zen thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Because you have to be very patient with yourself. You have to be you have to be really, really kind to yourself about, because as soon as I turn, because I've got the GoPro, but it feels weird to use that at the moment. I kind of will graduate into that. So as soon as I hit record, my mind just goes blank.
Yeah.
And it's like my mind is never blank. Like my
mind's
always going 1,000 miles an hour, going blah 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 off into all of these, because I don't necessarily see this issue as personal. Like I kind of see it. I see it theoretically more than I see it personally at this stage, because I kind of am just living my life. And it's so far removed from all of the politics of it, and you kind of, because in the beginning it's so terrifying and new and exciting, and it's like a culmination of, this is what I've been looking for, and I'm finally, you know what I mean, like there's just so many things going on that are terrifying and exciting in equal measure, more or less, or it was for me. That 20 years down the track, you kind of just, you know what I mean? Like, there's so far in the past, and I've kind of made peace with so much of that stuff. And now I'm waffling because I can't even remember why I started down that track. But so it kind of feels, I did that video at least 5 times. There was one that I actually did and edited and recorded, and then I was like, no, that's too negative. It's just a bummer. I'll redo it. And then I realized after that it was just going to be about, it just is what it is. There's nothing you can do to jazz it up.
You'll find that it reveals just the process of doing it reveals stuff in yourself, because you're trying to articulate things that you don't realize until you speak publicly. You don't realize how you make shortcuts in your own mind, and how infrequently you actually
pull out the whole
speak coherently and piercingly truthfully, without contradicting yourself or illustrating any kind of conflict or something you haven't quite thought about enough. You speak for 20 minutes without a break, without slipping up. It's really difficult, and it really reveals your inconsistencies in your thoughts. So I've been doing it for a year and just pulling myself apart. But I went up the hill this morning and I spoke for about, I just nailed it first time, and I spoke for about 15 minutes, and then I went on too long and started to waffle towards the end, and then you just lose track. And so you've got to kind of know when to stop. So say less rather than more, and then you start trying to sort of re-clarify what you've already said, and it just it's difficult.
Do you do the thing where you've done it, and then you're like, right, that's that? You kind of sit there for a minute and you go, no, that's it. You watch it back, blah 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 blah, and then about 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours later, you start thinking, you start overthinking it. And you're like, and I that's probably why I did it so many times, because I just did the same video over and over and over again, because you kind of, I start seeing it from other people's perspectives and start going, well, there's like that and that and and you start getting like pre-defensive almost. It's like, no, just let it go. Just let it go. Like
it's really therapeutic, I think.
You can do.
Very therapeutic. No, I mean, what I do is I just know, I have an idea of what it is I want to say. I can't do it with notes. It just doesn't work. And so what I do is I just have an order that I want to say what it is I want to say. But you can't do it if you're remembering. So any kind of prep you do is just to get you to a place where you've connected to something that you really understand, and then to share that understanding and choose your words spontaneously. That's what I do. So what I'll do is I'll kind of like, the ones that I use are the ones where I've roughly said what I wanted to say in a close enough way. It's never perfect, but and then the ones that I'm really happy with, that say what it is I want them to say. I can watch it a million times and it doesn't change. But if I'm not being honest, but not because I'm being deceitful or deceptive, but because I haven't got there in myself yet. If I haven't got to that place of understanding yet, and I publish a video, it will reveal that level of delusion, that level of kind of not quite a complete understanding. And that's when it's painful, because you realize just, fuck, I don't really actually, I was so sure of that thing that I've just said. I was so sure, but I'm not quite there yet. I don't really understand it. And it's painful. Over. Sorry. There's a slight lag, isn't there? Because you're in Australia.
Yeah. The other thing is, I started transitioning 20 years ago, but I think I've seen my face more in the last 2 weeks than I have for the previous 20 years.
Yeah.
Because you know what it's like? You're just living your life and you're seeing out of your eyes. So you kind of have a rough idea what you look like, but that doesn't necessarily show through in how you feel. So you kind of, in some ways, like when I first started riding bikes, like I got my first motorcycle when I was like 18 or something, and I felt like an imposter because I didn't know what I was doing, and I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And even getting licenses and things like that, you have to actually go and do physical courses and tests and things like that to get your license here. And there'd be these guys that show up in full leathers on the best learner motorbike that's all decked out and spitting all these bullshit theories about how good they are and blah, 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 blah. And then it comes down to the test, and it's whether rubber meets the road, and you actually have to achieve these difficult tasks, and you're quietly freaking out about what your performance is going to be like. And these guys are like, like doing the whole big bravado thing. And now I know that they probably felt as intimidated as I did, but you don't know that then. So, like the first couple of people failed and then I passed, and I was like, holy shit. But it's kind of like that a little bit, like with day-to-day transitional stuff as well. You kind of don't really realize, watching myself back came as quite a surprise in a few ways, because it's like I don't even know that I could articulate it, but I suppose it would be the same. I suppose I kind of thought that you would be able to physically, people are like, oh, you can always tell, or like you can always tell this.
Oh yeah, well, you were surprised that you were surprised that you were so masculine.
You just can't. I always assumed that there would be, and I mean, there are a few bits and bots here and there where like if I get really animated, then I do, get a little bit girly here and there. That's fine. Like I don't have a problem with that. But it was just watching myself back was kind of highly educational.
I think it's strange because I didn't I think when I was when I was young, because I was just pretending to be a man anyway, because I was just, because of my childhood, and I kind of brought myself up, and I spent most of my time alone, and had no real guidance. So I emulated what I thought, how I thought men behaved. And so I was always an imposter. I'm not saying that I'm a woman trapped in a man's body and I should have been a girl or anything like that. No, not at all. I don't think that. But I didn't know how to be a man. I didn't know how to be a male, didn't know how to be a boy. And so I just kind of consciously copied. And then, so I was always an imposter. And then when I transitioned, I felt less of an imposter, to be honest, because it felt more in alignment with how I was as a person. But I used being a woman to be the man I would have been anyway, I think. And so how I think of it now is that I've kind of like transitioned through sort of being a woman to be a kind of a more whole version of the man I would have been anyway. I mean, that's how I see it now. And just even lately, and my thinking's evolved so much since I took the channel down, and I've just kind of taken a step back, and I'm taking my time thinking about things a lot more. I mean, the last year was just shredded me completely, and I realised what I'm not more than I realised what I am. And now I'm kind of realising that, when I took the channel down and I just started again, really, I realise that there is an unknowable quality to our identity, and it shifts, it flows, and to kind of just be present and to witness this kind of shifting boundary between this mystery as it reveals itself and what we think we know, and if we hold on to the ideas that we kind of like construct our identity around, all we do is we restrict and
what's coming in.
And we confine ourselves. So now how I've changed, my perception of what I am has changed. I don't even know what to think, and I don't try and sort of identify myself. But I have noticed so lately is that what I didn't realise is that I think I listened to an interview with Corinna Cohn, who I'd spoken to a couple of times, and it was on her own podcast, and somebody asked her why she transitioned, and she said, you know what, I don't know. And that's one thing that I'm kind of getting comfortable with, because all I was trying to do when I look back, I was looking back on something that happened 50 years ago, 40 years ago, and I'm not that person anymore. So as you said in our first conversation, I need to trust that man that I was made the best decision he could at that time, and he did, and it's fine. But to try and sort of find some starting point, that you can construct a coherent narrative that says this is the why of who I am. This explains it. It ain't possible, I don't think, and you just got to let that go and just kind of be here.
I think that it's totally possible to do that.
You can convince yourself.
You're telling yourself a story. You are constructing a narrative based on what you know now and the influences that are impacting you now, and you are projecting that back onto the past. And the past can't speak for itself. No. And as humans, our memories are notoriously Swiss cheese-like.
Convenient as well.
Our memories just aren't reliable to be able to go back and be like, oh, yeah, I did this because of this. Or when I was 3, I had this experience. It was I
think you can identify kind of like key memories, but what I realised even this morning, talking to myself on the hillside, is that those key memories weren't causal in my decision to transition. you know, so yeah, I had trauma, I had pain, I had isolation. I was uncomfortable being a man, but that didn't, none of that was the reason I transitioned. It was kind of just, it was a part of my, you know, the history that I experienced, but it wasn't the motivation to transition. I transitioned
It's
because,
like the steps that you took on the road to where you
yeah,
are.
and I think that maybe there's something there. It might be inherited, it might be genetic, I don't know, but there was something there in the first place that was always there, that the environment I grew up in kind of like facilitated its expression and made it easier for me to kind of focus on those feelings. But they were none of the situations that I experienced were causal. I think if anything, they were just a part of, you know, any kid who's had a difficult childhood, really. So I think that we need to liberate ourselves from those questions, really.
Yeah, because you're not gonna, like that was one of the things that I noticed, like in our first conversation, you're like, what do you think it is? And I kind of said, well, like maybe it's, like a brain thing. I have no idea, but like I only kind of say that under, like absolute duress, because I really just have no idea why this is what it is, like, and I kind of, when I first started to transition, I kept bumping into people that were telling themselves like, complete stories, and this should have happened and that should have happened and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, whatever should or could have or would have happened didn't. And this is what is, and this is what I know. And I kind of tried quite hard. Like I made a very conscious effort to just stick with the things that I know, and get comfortable with what I kind of had, because I was an extreme, like I was kind of out there on my own in terms of gender expression anyway. Why that is, you have no idea. Like when you're growing up, you just know that you're a bit different. You don't know why. So I suppose in some ways I saw that as training to living with the uncomfortable uncertainty of, like there are so many things about, just aside from gender stuff, there's so much in life that we don't know. We live with so much uncertainty and impermanence, but then we get to this one area and we have to know. It's like, well, I don't know that that's going to happen in my lifetime. Like I kind of,
I think, I think that's part of growing up is becoming comfortable with the unknowable quality of life. And because essentially we are, when you get to our age, we are approaching the ultimate unknowable event, and that's death. And I think that perhaps that's why these questions start to take on a different quality when you're our age. And you start to think to yourself, well, there are things I cannot know, so surely it's best to get comfortable with that mysterious quality to life.
And I think I
think of it this way, that any kind of definitive sort of grasping of something as completely known is you'll just be focused on that, and you won't be able to like appreciate other things.
I'm a pretty big West Wing fan, and there's this bit where Stockard Channing is like classic Stockard Channing quote. She's like, "If you grip the fish too hard, Jed, it's gonna flop right out of your hand." Like, like it's kind of like that whole grasping thing. Like I've had a lot of Buddhism around me from my late teens. When I first read Siddhartha, Debbie gave me a copy of Siddhartha at the Glass Bead Game and the Women's Room, and a few other books that I read, and they kind of quite heavily impacted You know, like there are certain things that we're just not ever going to know.
No.
And
but I do think
the more we try to answer those questions with false narratives, the less likely we are to notice things that could make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say. You just said it perfectly, that in some way, if our attention is focused on what we think we know, we miss that unfolding. Yeah. But what I realized this week as well is that I just reached this point, and strangely, reading poetry has just been a revelation to me. And I realized that in a big way, not in some way, that in a very big way, our ability to know, to be present, and to have an intimate kind of full experience of life, we have to be in the moment. And depending on how much we are able to allow ourselves to feel, kind of dictates how present we are in the moment. And so if we're carrying a lot of pain and feelings and memories that we are too scared to look at and too scared to feel, then we can't actually be fully present. And so therefore the richness and the intimacy of our kind of lived experience is greatly diminished. And I got this came to me from reading poetry, because I thought, I'm reading poetry to my dog, and she's coming to the end of her life.
She appreciates it.
She does. But and I thought, she doesn't know what I'm saying, but she closes her eyes in bliss because she can hear how I'm saying it. So the feeling is the communication, the words are the starting point. And I think that made, just understanding that made me realize that how much we feel really is what it's all about. And so as I've been thinking about this and re-examining this last year that I've experienced, and I really found myself on my knees this year, like literally on my knees, like crying into the carpet. And my heart broke this year when I had to look back at and feel the things I couldn't feel and the experiences I had as a little boy. But that liberated me from the fear around being kind of able to feel at all. So, how many of us restrict what we feel because we're worried about feeling the wrong thing or feeling too much? So I'm getting to the point. And so this week, I realized that the feelings I've had sitting within me, that there was this fear of being a boy when I was little, this fear of being a man when I couldn't be a man. I just didn't know how to be a man. And I was terrified of my masculinity and the force and the power of testosterone, and just feeling like I couldn't control it. And I was kind of disgusted with myself as a man as well. I didn't really know how else to say it. So I had all these feelings just sitting inside me. And I've looked at all that over the last few weeks, and I don't fear it anymore. I don't fear being a man. And I am a man. Not your standard variety of man, but I'm a man, but something else as well. So I think that, you sent me a really interesting email, and that inspired us to have this conversation, really, because you came up with it. And every time we talk, you kind of zoom in on this as well, that it's not as simple as the critics would have people believe. It's like, I'm not a man in a dress, and you're not a woman pretending to be a guy with a beard and all the rest of it. It's like, it's not that simple. Something happens, whether that's the starting point, but there is a profound transformation, both physical, emotional, mental, and we become something else. So yeah,
it's interesting. I was kind of thinking, I'll get onto that in a second, but like there's this dialogue about people seem to be confusing self-ID into like there's just this weird boundary crossing that's happening where people are just making gaffes in logic and then basing assumptions on those gaffes, not realizing it and running with them. Like it's very strange, but people are not. Well, I suppose that was one of the revelation things to me as well, is that you really, until you change your hormones or you lose your hormones at like in your prime, you just have no concept of how powerful they are or what they do, or like that. I knew I would change outwardly. And I kind of think, like I was going to say, but stupidly, I didn't think I would change that much internally. But that's me looking back, telling myself the story. So it's like, how would I know? You know, like, you know, the only thing.
Did you think about it at the time? I didn't even think about how I was going to change. I didn't think about it at all.
20 years ago, it's hard to remember exactly what. You know what I mean? Like I remember having certain things I thought to myself or conversations that I had, but I don't, like it was a shock to me, and it was a shock to my partner as well. Like had I not had that partner at that time, I probably wouldn't have noticed the things that I noticed as clear or as quickly. But the other thing that's been like that I've been thinking about this week is like eunuchs. We're completely different than that. But 3,000 years ago, people that thought the world was flat, they were convinced the world was flat.
It might be.
Understood that people like that guys that didn't have a penis were a different category altogether. So much so that they weren't considered a threat, and they were given like made to guard princesses or queens' chambers and things like that. They were not seen as a threat at all. They were, you know, like a different category, had a different status. And here we are now, not, you know what I mean? Like with all of our knowledge and all of our technology, in some ways we've kind of gone a bit backwards.
I see your point.
You know what I mean? Like it's kind of strange, but I don't really know. I don't really know what category, because, you know, yes, I have basic female biology, but like a friend.
But do you though? Do you? I think. I mean,
a friend that I was speaking to was kind of making that point exactly. I have thicker skin. I have, you know, like I have to wax my back hair, like not often, and it's not carpet, but you know what I mean? Like it's disgusting. So, you know, like it comes off at random intervals when it starts to bother me. I smell differently. Like I smell differently, like completely, like, you know, like it just, the changes that happen are.
Yeah. I was lucky because my body was quite feminine anyway. I had really feminine legs. I always had women's legs. I used to get, and people used to make fun of me because I had women's legs. But
the first thing that happened to me
no body
in transition. Hair. Yeah, the first thing that happened to me in transition was like I got bum crack hair, like it.
No, I never had any of that, thankfully.
You know what I mean? Like not massive amounts, but it was certainly like a little tuft of.
Really.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah, I was always really. I had no body hair.
I don't know, to even say, you know, that you're a man, but you're something else, or like I don't know that it's that simple. Like I just don't. You know, like
I think
if that makes you feel, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to destabilize anyone. So if that's how you feel about your experience, I'm not going to contradict you. But like I just don't know that we have the language for this yet. Like it's kind of like that whole World War I thing, you know, like modern technology with old techniques.
Yeah,
creating
when I think about it, it's an ongoing transformation. It didn't end after I had all the surgery, and I was learning relationships and how people treated me differently. That has been ongoing for 25 years, nearly 25 years now. And so the transformation really is less about the physical transformation. That gives people the signals so that they treat you differently and relate to you in a different way, because men and women relate to each other in very, very different ways.
Very, very different.
So the transformation really, for me, has been about relationship to myself, my own emotional realm, relationship to other people, to my own feelings and my own physicality, my own vulnerabilities, because you have very different strengths and vulnerabilities when your hormones change, very different. And even when you have a physically different body, you protect different parts of that body, and it changes how you move through the space that you occupy. So there's huge, profound changes in our relationships in every way. But the transformation is ongoing, and when I think about, okay, so can I identify any signposts on that journey of the last 20 odd years where I can say, okay, right, that's when I realized this is when I realized that? I can't. It's just something happened very, very, very gradually where I became more sensitive in certain areas and less sensitive in other areas, more understanding in some areas, less understanding. And there's just this broadening, deepening relationship to the whole experience of feeling what I feel. And, I regret nothing at all. And it's an amazing thing. But I think we're missing a lot in the narrative nowadays. We're missing so much because we're concentrating on, I don't know what we're concentrating on really. And I frankly, I'm kind of staying out of it. But
the further away from it you are, the better, really, because it's really
just toxic. It's just really toxic. And frankly, the people that the nature of the argument, really, nobody wants to change their minds. Nobody wants to learn about the other. Nobody wants that. All they want to do is to defend their position, to be right. Yeah. So
sorry, I'm just bringing up.
Yeah, go for it.
A conversation I had with someone.
You might be able to tell I've had quite a bit of coffee this morning,
you're fine.
And brandy as well. It's like I can't. I've got into the habit of having brandy in my coffee in the morning, and it's like it starts the day with this charge and this slight kind of feeling of being a bit tiddly.
Yeah, I was having a chat to someone earlier, and I was saying, I don't know whether it's just my algorithm or what's happening, but there seems to be this takeover that's happening that has a really nasty, toxic edge on the GC side.
Really?
And it's kind of reverting back to stuff that happened decades and decades ago. But no one's like lots of people are talking about, in private chats, like, this is terrible. But no one's really saying anything in public. Because
what's happening then?
I don't know, stagnating, basically, like I'm right, you're wrong on both sides. Both sides are saying essentially the same things, like, I'm open to chatting and changing my mind, but the other side isn't. Like, it's just a deadlock.
You know what I think I'm when I look at I don't think that we can sort of separate the whole trans question, the conversation around transsexualism, transgenderism, as we call it now. I don't think we can isolate that from the context of this Western monoculture. And at the moment, I think you can, largely because of the current sort of like global crisis, you can see, and it's particularly if you look at America, that there is a huge deconstruction going on of culture, basically.
And so,
Yeah. So the lie of postmodernism is just falling apart, and all these kind of like woke agendas are falling apart. So I think I feel quite hopeful that there will be just a natural kind of rebalancing.
Changeover.
Yeah, there'll be a rebalancing of the whole of everything, because
it will be very interesting to see what that looks like.
Yeah. I think there may be a little bit of an overcompensation around the people transitioning, but I think it will sort itself out. And there are people such as yourself that just it feels completely natural. I mean, I don't know how I feel about my own journey. Maybe I could have been something else, as Stella said. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is. I don't think I'm the same as you, though. I think that, because I was never hyper feminine as a little boy. I was effeminate at times and played with femininity, but I wasn't kind of obviously a feminine boy.
Well, that's the thing, is that being an effeminate boy is much more difficult than being a masculine girl.
Yeah.
Because there's the physicality of it as well. Like being an effeminate boy is only obvious if you're slight or fragile. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a physical when you meet a tomboy, and there are varying degrees of, like feminine girls that are kind of a bit, rambunctious, and then girls that are, like there's a range of that behavior. You can look at them and go, oh, that's a tomboy. Whereas when you go in the other direction, it's not as easily visible.
Do you think there's more
geeky boys?
Yeah. Do you think there's more pressure on? Do you think it's easier to be a masculine girl than it is to be a feminine boy?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
Asked. Let's back up and go home. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just end it there, shall we?
Yeah.
but it is, and I remember catching myself doing things like in
self-correcting.
Yeah, I would.
So that didn't ever
try and get boys to protect me when I was little, and I'd go up and sort of like hide behind them and try and sort of kiss them to make them protect me. And I'd be like, then I'd go, fuck,
how did that go?
What am I doing? But even as young as like 10, I would be doing that at like 10 or 11, and then I thought, shit, I've got to stop this. And so,
see, but if that's your behaviour that comes naturally as a 10-year-old, then maybe you weren't quite as masculine as you think you were. You know what I mean? Like it's just hard to go back and look down.
But I also kind of, because I lived we had a huge garden and there were trees. I used to spend time in the back garden just climbing trees as well. But, is that exclusively a masculine thing?
No, that's not gendered behaviour at all. Like, it's very weird for me because I grew up around very self-assured, almost to the point of being dismissive, like very self-assured, very powerful, very intelligent women. And, like they used to give out stickers like girls can do anything. It was like, the 80s and the early 90s where there was this big push like to kind of make girls a bit more resilient. And I kind of am looking back now, and there's something that Grace said the other day that kind of just really like, what? I believe her, but there seems to have been like
Grace who?
Something. Grace is one of the one of the more prominent detransitioners. I keep going to call them famous. They're prominent. She was doing a podcast with Karina.
Oh, really?
I actually no. I think it was another detrans thing, but they were talking about
what was she on this? Was she on the 60 Minutes thing?
Yeah, that was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know her. Yeah.
She was just talking about what it was like growing up as a girl and feeling pressure about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of, I saw that, but I didn't experience it. Like, I kind of, like, I saw a tiny amount of it. I didn't see that much. And I actually went to an all-girls high school for the first 2 years of high school. So, like, in puberty, so 12, 13, 14, there we all were together.
I mean,
so something has changed. Something pretty dramatically seems to have shifted.
Do you think too much emphasis is put on like gendered behaviour for children?
I think maybe, yeah.
I do.
It seems well, I don't have kids. I'm not around teenagers, so like I don't. And it's not something that I really am tuned into. But it seems like something about social media and girls is not. It's not washing very well.
Doy, I think this might be a different subject, but I just kind of I think that the motive, what people are looking for in transition, I think has changed.
Yeah,
I think that's really changed, and that's why there's so many detransitioners. I think so. This works for me, and it clearly works for you as well. But I'm not sure that we were looking for anything in it. We just did it because it seemed like the natural thing to do.
Well, the other thing that's getting lost in this is that we had to go looking for it. Has my light just changed? Is it just me? Yeah. I feel orange.
It's just
there's nothing I can do about it, but I feel
it's fine. Don't worry.
Don't worry. To get to the point where, like, we had to go looking for it. Like, I don't know how you felt about it, but it was super confronting. Like, to be like, you, like, admitting that you wanted to do this was like hitting rock bottom. Like, it wasn't something that you did on a whim. It wasn't, like the whole, like, it certainly didn't make you cool. Like, I was kind of tapped into a queer, lesbian community space with lots of, there you go. It's something on my screen that's changing color. There we go.
Yeah, you know what? I've just remembered.
The whole thing has changed, and it was never very cool. Like, I kind of knew that I would be okay if I started transitioning and then had to stop and ended up looking a bit weird. I kind of knew I would be able to deal with the social ramifications of that outside, that I was robust enough to deal with that.
Sure.
Well, I thought I was, and I am. And that I was tucked into this nice, neat little pocket of the queer community that was kind of a bit, like, sex friendly, kink friendly. Like, it was just this unique little pocket where it really didn't matter what I did or what I looked like, I would be welcome. So I kind of knew I would be okay on that front, but it kind of was, like, this was not cool. This was not a cool thing to do. This was like, and you had to do a lot of work to get to the point. Like, it kind of, you made the realization, you hit rock bottom, and then you had to build yourself back up to even go to the first counsel, like, and say it out loud to somebody was like, I don't even have the words to express what it was like. Like, it was like, I'm one of those demented, most hated groups of society. Like, I'm with them. Like, it was not, whereas these kids now, it's all cool, and it's like, maybe I'll just try this on. And I was chatting to a mother of a kid that wants to transition, that hasn't yet, and the mother is quietly freaking out, but largely on board. Actually, no, she's being as realistic and cautious as she could possibly be in the face of her child being trans. Like, she's basically me, at 15 or 16, like it looks like, and I've never met this person, I don't know this person, so I'm just going off what she says, but she's like, I'm pretty sure my kid is trans, I'm pretty sure my kid is going to end up transitioning, and I need to get on, like I have to do the work to be okay with that and navigate this and try and keep my kid from harm, because like what's going to happen to these 16-year-olds that start transition and hormones while they're still growing, like there's all that sort of stuff. And she was saying that, so I was chatting to her earlier, and she was saying, you know, like she's chatting to other parents who are just totally on board, that seem to think that these kids can just take testosterone for 2 or 3 years and then stop, and there won't be any long-term effects, that they won't, you know, like once you pass, there is no going back. Like you need to be as sure as you can possibly be and know all of the ins and outs, like before you go down this path. Like it's not just you know, like Jello shots. Like
I don't think it's like a just, you know, you can tentatively kind of explore
that
it.
Seems to have changed. Like,
yeah, that's what's changed, doesn't it? Because I think if you're going to explore it, I mean, I think it didn't. The ones, I think there's one study on kids that go on to hormone or puberty blockers and that don't pursue it, and it's like they all do. Once you're on puberty blockers, you just go for it. I think it's like, and even social transition,
you're kind of trapped on. It's kind of like a you know, like a conveyor belt, because once you stop puberty, like all your friends are continuing puberty. So it kind of stunts them, like it freezes them in time when the level of growth is just profound.
It's crazy. Can you remember what you said to your therapist at the time? You didn't, I mean, you weren't kind of mixed up or in crisis or anything like that. You just, were you?
I was pretty freaked out.
But I mean, were you in some kind of personal crisis that was tearing you apart? See, I was. I was. Yeah. So I got my medical records recently because I wanted to check some things out, and so I got all my medical records. To
poke yourself a few more times.
No, I was really interested.
Curious. Yeah.
I was really interested, and so because I was just interested, and so I got all my medical records, and it's like 25 years ago nearly, and I had forgotten how in denial I was and how messed up I was. I'd forgotten. I knew that I'd had some painful episodes in my early 20s that kind of cascaded into this crisis. But reading the doctor's letters to each other, like my GP, my psychiatrist, and my other psychiatrist, reading them, I remember now, and also how much I was in denial. And this got me thinking that even if you're in therapy, like in getting back to our original, what we started talking about in this conversation, that you can't, when you look back, you can't fully like know what happened. But what I do recognize is that guy that I used to be had no clue really, didn't have any understanding of what motivated him really, and just knew that he wanted to do it, and he'd always wanted to do it, and just did it. And so it's taken me a long time, well, mostly over the last year on my channel actually, to just penetrate the denial that I had. And I think denial is a way of protecting ourselves. So if we are in denial about something, it's simply because we can't face it. And so, this gets back to your point about like building a narrative that supports your decision rather than just saying, I don't know. But reading these letters, I realized just how messed up I was. I mean, I was really, really messed up. But I also wasn't sure about transition. And
no,
I wasn't
100% sure. I wasn't 100% sure.
I got there over 3 years of therapy And I just got to the point, I said, well, this isn't going to go away. It's always been there. I need to find a way to live with it. So I'll just do it. That's what I got to. But when I first sought help, I was still, like I've read the letters from my first therapy session, and I was in crisis, and I just was trying to be a man. And I did not want to transition.
Trying to be a man at gender therapy.
No, I know. But I didn't want to transition. I didn't.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find a way to be a man, and I was in a real mess.
I wanted to do it, but without the negative connotations.
What were the negative connotations?
Well, that you were transsexual.
Yeah. Why was that a negative though? Ridicule? Like because we were freaks or something?
You know, the late 90s. This was like, I remember the year before. Okay, so I saw Boys Don't Cry, and then Mardi Gras happened, and we were marshalling that year. And so basically you're standing inside the barriers talking to the crowd that are like, so that they fence off the route.
Yeah.
And marshals are inside the barriers making sure people don't jump the gates, and you end up just chatting to people, and there's a big group, and they basically, if you go to watch Mardi Gras, you pick a spot and you stay there all night, and there's like thousands and thousands of people and floats, and it's just this big party, and everybody is like ecstatic and happy to be there, and everyone's cheering at every float. And then the FTM Australia float comes past, and everyone just goes, and then they're gone, and they go back like to cheering, like they just like it, like being trans was one of the few things that was just not okay to be. Like, it was not okay to do this. Like outside my, even in the lesbian community, like the vanilla lesbian community or the mainstream lesbian community, it was not okay to do this. Like, you know, like in my little pocket of my friendship groups of people that knew and liked me, it was okay. But outside that, it was like there was just negative connotations. And to step onto this process and to go along, like undertake this process meant that you had to become okay with this. Like, you had to find a way to process all the information, to figure out how you felt about it. And, you know.
So do you I think that you said in your email that we've gone from people being curious about it and kind of like, yeah, I don't get it, but clearly the person's suffering, so they need to find a way to live in the way that works for them. And I think that there was a huge part of society that were kind of revolted by it, revolted and disgusted and freaked out by the dissonance it causes in them. Like, it's kind of unsettling and disconcerting because it destabilizes reality.
It's something deeply internal. People don't understand why it upsets them.
They don't understand why there's this visceral response that is kind of disgusting in a way. So I think that people have been forced to bypass that and accept it, and that's why that there's these different kind of people who've been forced to the wider society has been forced to accept something that a lot of people are freaked out by. And so now we've kind of pushed back. There's a pushback now to the point where, how can this be any other thing than sexual for men anyway? How can it be? How can you be in the wrong body? How can you be a woman who feels more comfortable as a man? How can you be a man who's more comfortable living as a woman? There must be a root cause that's really identifiable and simple, and so that we can say, aha, this is it.
And fits into this box so that it makes me feel nice and comfortable, and I figured it out. And it's like...
And in some way it confirms...
Yeah.
And in some way it confirms their disgust at what this is. So... yeah, it's interesting. I never thought of that before. So,
And like I'm watching it get worse and worse on Twitter almost weekly. Like there's like these big shifts. It's really interesting because like I was talking to Max and he was saying that a friend of his had kind of was talking about how the generational shifts, like in the 50s when this started, it was miraculous, like, or when this started being known, not when it started, but when it started being, you know, like talked about in the mainstream, it was a modern marvel and it was a miracle, and it was like the whole like 1950s upward mobility, embracing technology, being excited about going to the moon and all of the things that man could achieve or humankind could achieve. There was just this level of excitement about the possibilities, and then the 60s happened, and I don't really know, like I don't know that bit of history, what trance was like in the 60s. Like I kind of think like there would have been an initial excitement and then a kind of bit of boredom and a little bit of pushback. But then the 70s feminist stuff kind of took off. And then I know in the late 70s there started being some serious pushback. And then in the 80s AIDS happened. And it kind of almost toned back down again. Like I could be wrong about that, but that's my perception of, like, because I'm kind of into history, so I look at lots of different things. And then in the 90s, it started getting a bit more like, but over the decades, there have been definite, like, it's okay, it's the devil, it's kind of, you know, just a bit abstract, like, you know, like there has been like different mindsets and different stages of understanding what this is.
I think people are more okay with women being men than they are with men being women. But now we've got the issue of, you know, ROGD in girls, and it's like the new sort of anorexia that there's. But I still think that people are more okay with women being men.
Yeah, they are.
But I think that that's because male sexuality, so that there has to be, and there is, a sexual component.
I also think it's the difference between men and women in general as well. Like men are like very welcoming. Like I was just chatting to a friend of mine who
men aren't threatened by it, are they?
He's in the army and he's, you know, like a decently high-ranking officer, and he was saying that he's only had one or two bad experiences, like in the army, like where you would think he would cop it.
Well, he's a trans guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you
think...
like,
oh, I've only had two experiences in this whole, like, because we transitioned together. So he's been 20 years as well. I think he started 6 months after me or something like that. But yeah, you know, like guys they don't see this as threatening.
No. When I
like not even gay guys, like gay guys that I've interacted with, like some of them will be like, no thanks.
Yeah.
You know, like no. And it's like, okay, whatever. Like,
yeah, we had a trans guy. We had a trans guy that worked as a tattooist in the shop that I used to have a share in years and years and years ago. And we kind of like, I was a guy then. I was Maya then. But because I had an insight into masculinity, the guys in the shop were kind of like, they treated him like a little brother. And he was young anyway, but, you know, it was like...
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, isn't that cute?
Yeah, but so there is something different though about male transitioners, you know, male to female transitioners, because there's like this especially, you know, the ones that create the pushback, because there is this like aggression, there is this like dominance that they must be acknowledged. And so, I mean, I understand what the pushback is about, but how many male to female transsexuals are actually like that? I've never met one.
that are
I've never met one.
elbows.
Yeah, they're like, you must
I've met a
accept me. I must be allowed into your toilet. I've never met any like that.
I've met a couple, and I've always kind of thought that was, you know, evidence of how strong male socialization is, because they're generally early in transition, and let's face it, like trans women cop a lot of shit, like a lot.
They do.
Like, you know, like I can't even. Like there are a lot of like trans guys prognosticating about this at the moment. I can't even imagine the level of, you know, like just abuse and shit that like
I said in the beginning,
I've never even had to think about it. Like
the transformation is ongoing and it takes a long time. So initially when you first transition and you're excited about it all, and you are kind of like, yay, here I am. And I think that perhaps the people that are creating the pushback, they're newly transitioned. So it takes time to kind of like just settle into it and just, you know, you just want to get on with your life and not kind of be on show. And I think that's part of the issue that
there's a lot of pressure. Like I can kind of see it, like, you know, because like boys are kind of like puppies, or, you know, lion cubs learning how to, you know, like the rumbling and stuff like that. You can kind of see them competing and learning how dominance works and how to be, you know, like the good guys end up being like, they're not aggressively dominant, they are just, you know, competent and dominant, like without the threat level. And they learn that over time, and then you get these people that have been through that process that then start transitioning, and they kind of feel like they have to prove themselves from the start.
I think so. Yeah.
So they don't necessarily, like, they kind of go, I'm going to come in and prove that I'm this, that, and the other, and then I'll relax. And it's like, no. It works completely differently in woman land. You kind of need to come in submissive, and then watch for a while, and then start to build bridges. Like, it's not like guys, like male socialization is a solo event on one level. Like, you have to make it for yourself. Womanhood is much more of a cooperative, like building things together, like building bridges together. I don't know. I think
you're dead right. It's just about the differences between,
you know, so you get these people coming in not understand, like they're so busy trying to find their position that they get themselves busy when they should be still.
I always felt like
they do stupid things being busy instead of being still, and it's like,
I had an email from I had a lovely email probably about 6 months ago from a young trans woman, and she was very insightful, and I remember one thing she said, that we are gracious guests in, you know, in femininity, in womanhood. So we are gracious guests as males, moving through the world as women, and it's, you know, those men that don't seem to appreciate that are, you know, messing it up for everybody, I think. But listen, I've got a question that I spoke to a friend of mine who he's a teacher, and he said to me, because we were talking about sexuality, and because that's one thing that I've been confronting in myself lately as well, is, you know, how much of us, because I've really struggled with kind of just the concept of objectifying yourself as a woman that a lot of us male to female transsexuals do, and how much of that is sexual, how much of that self-objectification is sexual in nature. Like, are you turned on by your own body? Are you kind of attracted to yourself? And I've really struggled with that as an idea, probably because I had such early onset. I had onset of sort of dressing as a girl from toddler. So, and that's before we're even really aware of gender roles, I always thought. But my mum remembers me dressing as a toddler and being really excited and happy about the whole thing. And so, because I have never had a normal sexuality or a normal kind of relationship to my masculinity, and it's just, this is how I've always been ever since I was a toddler. So I really struggled to kind of confront those questions about, you know, autogynephilia and whether I was attracted to myself and whether this is a kind of
I kind of think that's a bit of a beat up, to be honest. Like, the more I think about it, because like the other thing that isn't spoken is, like, I know lesbians that never transitioned, that haven't ever thought about transitioning, that, like, one of them admitted to one of my exes that in order to orgasm, she had to imagine that she had a penis, like, you know, like, and that she had to be penetrated. Like, there's all sorts, like, you know, like, I think we are in extreme cases where it's like, obviously, like, this is kind of bordering on paraphilia, like, AGP, but like,
I think no, but we are so complex.
Like, we are not just beings.
Like, we are sexual beings, and our sexuality, it's this intricate, individual, unique thing to ourselves. Yes, you can fall into different groups, but you know, I think that we are incredibly complex as sexual beings, men and women. So, but I wanted to confront that, and I wanted to kind of explore that. But so I was talking to my friend about it, and because he was saying, well, because I'm sort of like facing all these deeply embedded feelings that I was in denial about, like, you know, this fear of masculinity, fear of my own sexuality. And he said to me, so who do you want to be with? And I said, well, you know, I always feel more comfortable with men. I've had relationships with women, but I think because I always had this longing to be a woman, they were really incomplete, and because I was incomplete as a person, and it just didn't work. But to be with a man kind of feels much more natural. But emotionally, I'm not talking about the sexuality as a part of it, but in my emotional balance. And I'm attracted to men physically. But he said to me that he said something to me that was really interesting about the fact that what we do, the starting point of our sexuality, so one of the ingredients is that we can eroticize what is missing in our healthy, balanced environment, childhood environment. And so because my father was missing and a masculine presence was missing, he was kind of implying that I eroticized that which was missing, and I think he might have a point there, because to be with, I'm attracted to men that are older than me. Kind of, you could say that they're father figures as well. So, I mean, our sexuality is incredibly complicated and incredibly complex, and so just identifying that there is some sort of like fatherly quality in the men that I'm attracted to. Does that then completely invalidate my attraction to men? And does that mean that it's not real, that attraction, if it's always been there as well? So, you know, I know where you're going to go. I can see your face. I can see your face. But the point I'm trying to make is that you can't definitively know these things. All you've got to say is this healthy or is it unhealthy? Is this damaging, or am I okay with this? And you know, that's what we have to say. And sorry, can I just finish this point? Because I know I'm waffling. I know, and you're being very generous for allowing me to talk at such length.
You're right.
I think as well that this is about the conduct of TRAs and the people that have embedded this ideology, is that it's not about whether you're trans or not, whether you're autogynephilic or whether you're HSDS or whether you're a trans man, a trans woman, whatever. It's about how you conduct yourself. Are you behaving appropriately? Are you behaving with consideration? That's what it's about.
are you moving like, yeah, you know, like, and well, the other thing is that most of the, like we've already established, most of the TRAs are not trans people.
They're using it.
They're Antifa types.
Or their supporters.
Being woke.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it's kind of like, well, my father is missing as well. So am I sexualizing men by sleeping or having relationships with women? You know, like, I kind of...
I don't... Listen, I was just using it as an illustration.
No,
I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it.
Yeah. I just kind of, I don't know, like, I just think there are so many ungenerous...
Yeah, there are.
And they're geared towards being ungenerous perspectives on this. They're just so, like, they're just determined to pathologize in some ways. And it's like...
I think that we are...
6 months, can we move on?
Yeah. I think that let's get it. Let's end on a really contentious one that you have an opinion on. I know you do, and
let's not.
No, let's do it. Let's do it because look, I think this is a really good conversation, and we both said some hopefully interesting things. But I think that we are in a mess. That's a little clue where I'm going to go with this. We are in a mess, as Glenna says. And I don't necessarily think that we are in the mess we're in because of transsexual people. We are in a mess because of kind of woke ideology and the degradation of the education system and the victim mentality that seems to be kind of inherent in kind of that the thinking that's kind of embedded itself in the education system. So I don't think it's got anything to do with being trans. I think being trans is just a vehicle for that kind of ideology. But the point I was going to make is, I know that you saw the interview that Glenna and his gang had with Blanchard, and I thought Blanchard was pretty good in that interview. I've watched all his interviews, and sometimes I think he kind of like quite down.
He was quite balanced.
He was quite balanced, but he made a point at the end of it, which I thought was really interesting, that there's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of finger pointing.
A lot of convenient finger pointing.
Convenient finger pointing and saying, like, these people are the problem. And he pointed out that, you know, there's an element of this that is you could kind of say has been caused by feminism. I think he said. Did he say that? You remember what he said? Because we talked about this.
Yeah, he said that women have supported like they're kind of doing this whole thing.
The supporters of the trans thing
don't support this, and you know, like, women have driven this forward as well, is what he said. That, you know, like, so maybe let's calm down a little on that, on the finger pointing.
Yeah.
Like, he said, women have encouraged and brought this forward as well.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
And he left it at that, like, and kind of heavily implied. So maybe let's, you know, like, calm down with some of the extremist, you know, rhetoric. And I kind of think that you can take that in a couple of different ways. But it is really interesting because this whole woke leftist thing, like, I've been watching a lot of Peterson, and a lot of Christina Hoff Sommers and Camille Paglia.
That's good as well, isn't he?
And they kind of draw a pretty complete picture.
Yeah. That
is, like, I'm not an academic. I haven't read the literature. I'm a chef that makes shit up as I go along. Like, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, but, like, there's certainly a case to be made, and it is quite plausible that there was a lot of pressure, like the 60s happened, and there was a whole generation of people that should have been academics that dropped out, tuned out, took acid, ruined their brains, as far as Camille Paglia says. And then these French academics came in with these postmodern theories that Peterson talks about being reworked communism, because the communist experiment absolutely failed and the jig was up by the end of the 60s. So they kind of reworked it and came up with this really interesting academic mental masturbation postmodernist thing, which is really
Post-structuralism and all that.
like it's really interesting, but
It's nonsense.
it's
It's
nonsense, and
nonsense.
it's
It is
led to it. Like
nonsense.
it's just degraded over
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
like, and they talk about like there was a lot of pressure to just like women's studies needed to be implemented as
Okay.
quickly as possible, and they didn't perhaps think about
Yeah.
making it as robust as they possibly could have. Like they're studying gender, but there's no biology, no science,
Mm-hmm.
like, and then they come up with these wacky theories that, like apparently the science had shown decades before were untrue, like the blank slate stuff, like that hadn't been discussed for decades because science had already come in on that and that was untrue. And then suddenly it's just spun into,
I think it's Camille Paglia is Camille Paglia is a joy to listen to because she
gets a little bit egotistical, but she is a very sharp knife.
Yeah, but she just says it like it is, and she's very direct. Like, she doesn't mince her words.
I don't like, and even Kathleen Stock has kind of said, like a lot of this gendered stuff came from feminist theory.
Yeah.
But no one really, like, they kind of like I've seen several interviews where it's admitted, like where these people kind of say, oh yeah, this came from feminism, like this started as a feminist theory, and clearly it's gone on from there.
What do you mean? In what sense though? That gender is a social construct.
Yeah, gender is
but it isn't. It isn't.
No, it's not.
Of course it isn't.
The science, and by the time that theory actually got published, the science had already proved like 20 years before that it was completely unfounded, but they promoted this and pushed it because it suited the purpose.
Well, that's it. This is the same thing as just saying like being a woman is a social construct. I saw that the other day. It's just horseshit. No, it's all horseshit.
Absolutely horseshit. And it's kind of like it has slowly over time morphed and, like post-structuralism and then, like gay liberation and gay marriage and, like all of this other stuff has happened. And then the internet has, like got formed, and we kind of have these woke kids that don't really understand the history.
Yeah.
And now we have two groups determined that they're absolutely right, screaming at each other on the internet.
Yeah.
I just don't know how constructive.
I think I saw something a while ago, maybe nearly a year ago, and it was an interview with different sort of gender non-conforming guys, like a late middle-aged male to female transitioner, a younger, varying degrees in their journey, and like non-binary men, and there was a guy. He had a lace shirt on, and a pair of kind of Cuban heels, and that was it. And he was saying, "No, I'm a woman. I'm a woman. That's how I feel." And so we've got to the point now where feelings of femininity, which is, it's a complicated question. What's feminine and what's masculine? Feelings. So, but it's difficult to articulate. But we all feel. We all know what it feels like. We all know what it means. What that means. But this guy was equating feelings of femininity with being a woman, and so being the fact that he can put on a lace shirt and say, "I am now a woman because I feel feminine and I've got a lace shirt on." That's how the place we've arrived at.
Where all of this wankery has landed us, and it's just like
it's just nonsense. It's a disassociation from reality.
I used to really love when Eddie Izzard was like, "No, these are not."
What's happened to Eddie Izzard?
These are my clothes. Like I really loved that. It was like, yes, absolutely. Like you go.
Yeah.
I kind of think that there needs to be reality exists, how people perceive you. Like there is a line where it's like you can't just feel, and expect strangers and the like, you know what I mean? Like, these are bureaucratic, like my birth certificate, my driver's license, passport. These are documents that have to be based in some kind of reality, and it's you know, like, it just is such a sticky area.
So
I
what
kind of think
you said to you sorry to interrupt you said something to me last time we spoke privately, and that there needs to be. I mean, look, I before I get into this, I don't know what my opinion is on what I'm just going to say. So, but I think you said something about this a while
let's
ago.
figure it out together.
That there needs to be some kind of agreed upon criteria, some agreed upon distinction between, you know, what is a transsexual, what are you, what am I, and so that you know, that used to be you had full surgery and you changed your birth certificate and your driving license and all that kind of stuff, did all that. So you changed your relationship in the legal and physical realms of being, and emotionally and physically you were moving through the world as the opposite. So that seems to be something that now is considered to be prejudicial.
Well,
so now you've got people saying that's prejudice. That's prejudicial against people that don't want to do that.
And it is, but
is it?
You know, like, is it?
But if we stick to that, there's a distinction between what you are and what I am, and me, what I am, and a guy wearing a lace shirt saying he's a woman are two different things.
Yeah.
Sorry,
but how to make that category something without discriminating at the same time? You know what I mean? Like, it's like feelings at.
Well, he should be able to dress. This guy I'm talking about should be able to dress how he wants to dress and do what he wants to do. But what he's doing, he's also trying to alter reality.
If you have not participated in any hormonal interventions, if you have not undertaken any surgical options, if you have not changed over any of your, like, you know, like, in order to change my documents, I had to have 2 irreversible surgeries. And there was some contention at the time because in some states in Australia, hormones count. So in New South Wales, hormones are an irreversible surgery. In Queensland, they are not. So if I had been born in Queensland, I would have had to have top surgery and I would have had to have a histo in order to be legally male. In New South Wales, just the surgery, just the hormones and the top surgery was enough. But that's enough, you know, like.
But my point is we're transsexual. I'm still not a woman. I'm still not a woman. But a guy in a lace shirt thinks he's a woman.
He's still a man. Like,
he's still a man. I'm still male. I'm still a man.
Yeah.
But I'm a transsexual man.
Yeah.
I have my point is
I'm a transsexual.
No, but my male transsexual. My point is I'm not trying to alter reality in my own head. No, that guy's trying to alter reality in his own head.
No,
and everybody else's head.
And everybody else's, which is the
everybody
problem.
else's head.
He can think whatever he likes. See, this is the thing. Like, everyone on Twitter is constantly triggered by all of these people saying nonsense, and it's like, if self-ID is not the law of the land, then he can say whatever he likes.
This guy in a lace shirt.
You know, this abstract person in a lace shirt can say whatever he likes, because
it doesn't matter.
When someone that doesn't know him walks up to him, they see a man, they interact with a man. Like, there needs to be a physical line of this is where it's at. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on this side, so cover my own ass. There need, like, for practical living in the real world off the internet. Like, when you're on the internet, you can put up any picture you want. You can be a cartoon, you could be a dog, you could be fucking Korean, whatever. In real life, that doesn't wash. So, you know, like in order for someone to actually legally be the opposite gender, and I'm saying they're legally the opposite gender. I'm not saying they are the opposite.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Like when I say to someone that I've that I've met or whatnot, or someone that I've, you know, proposition, like when, you know, like I'm on, you know, surfing for sex kind of thing, and I'm like, I'm a trans guy.
Shocking.
Is basically the second thing I say, or the first or the second thing I say to them. I expect them to know that that means I'm not actually biologically a guy.
Of course.
You know, like there's a level of understanding that gender ideology has killed that makes it then untenable to speak language, which is
so we can't even use reasonable language anymore. But do you know what, I just had a thought that and I've been feeling this yesterday, I think, when I was walking the dog, and I just, because somebody spoke to me, and I thought, we live in a you know, so we are sexually dimorphic species. We are man and woman, male and female. And I think that I don't understand why to want to be something that is neither of those, but a sort of like a mixture of both of those. I think that's confusing for people, but there have always been people, masculine women that are masculine and men that are feminine, but they are feminine men and masculine women.
Past.
Yeah, but and there are.
She's digging again.
But there are also women that pass as men and men that pass as women. So now there's this kind of like mushing together of all of that. So I think it's confusing when I see myself, or when I feel that I'm kind of indistinguishable as either. I find that. I mean, I still find it uncomfortable if I'm wholly male and I'm not aware of my physicality as feminine in appearance. I feel uncomfortable. And I'm sure many people would call that dysphoria. I find it incongruous.
Yeah.
If I present in an overtly masculine way, which I do quite a lot up here, it's okay when I'm on the hills and in the forest and stuff. But as I move through my social interactions, I prefer to be obviously feminine. And that means people interact with me in a certain way, and that makes me feel comfortable. So it's important for me to adhere to the binary. So I want to present as a woman. I don't want to present as a feminine man. But if you want to present as a feminine man, go for it. But it doesn't make you a woman, and it's not transsexualism. That's the point.
Cross-dressing.
Yeah, we have to say, okay, there is a binary here. And when we don't respect that binary, that's about deconstructionism. It's destabilizing, and that's what people push back on. They're quite willing to kind of say, yeah, you do what you want to do, but don't expect me to understand that.
Yeah.
What would you like to end on? Because we've gone into some really interesting areas, and
I kind of would like to see, there's like a lot of this stuff is kind of going off the rails a little bit. It feels like it's going off the rails a little bit, and people are getting like the.
What do you mean the
argument?
Do you mean the argument?
It's kind of getting like, it kind of feels like it's hitting a crescendo almost in an area that, like, it's just not that helpful, and
what do you suggest?
I'm not seeing people talk about detransitioners or kids or any, like, even women's sports or prisons anymore. It's all about,
really?
Like, it's kind of gone off into this really weird area where it's just, I'm right, you're wrong. I don't know how practical that is. I don't know how helpful that is. Like, there's just like there are a lot of people that are really upset, and I can totally see why. Like, I totally get why, but I don't even know. Like, I just don't know. Like,
you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, I'm quite concerned about, I think it kind of feels like it's become a little bit untethered from, wherever it started from. It's not there anymore. Like,
I wonder lately, wondered this morning actually, and yesterday I was thinking about this, because I wonder how many people, such as myself, male to female transsexuals, who've transitioned and they're like 20, 30 years post-op. I wonder how many of them, if they could, would flick a switch and go back to being a man, but knowing what they know now. So it's like becoming a woman. No, I think I find myself in a place now that how I feel now is that if I could flick a switch and be male, full male now, I think I might do it. But I would need to. I'd need to know everything. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to turn the clock back and have another go at being a man or anything like that. But I think it's some way sort of becoming a woman for 20 odd years it's been so transformative. I feel like I'm a better man now for it, basically. And so I think in some way, this journey through womanness, I think I could be a better man. So if I could flick a switch and be a male again, I think I could do a better job of it now. But it took transition to do that. So I wonder how many people like me. I mean, I no longer fear being a man anymore. I think that's the issue. I feared being a man, and so after all this time living in this form and in relationships I have and how the transformation I've experienced, I think I if I could do that, I would. But I wonder how many people feel like that, because it just doesn't feel as important anymore. It's kind of, I want to be consistent, as I said earlier on. If I'm not if I'm confused in my presentation and I think that makes other people confused, I don't enjoy that feeling. So I need to be consistent with what I am and how I present. But if I wouldn't want to kind of like detransition, and I don't want to. I know this is sounding very convoluted, but because I would look really, really strange. And so I wouldn't be able to fit into the binary. But if I could flick a switch and miraculously just become a man again, I think I probably would. But only after the experience I've had as a woman. It's just something I was thinking about. But I'm quite comfortable and quite happy as I am. But I think that, you said a couple of times that you knew that you could handle it. If you transitioned and it didn't work, you could handle the strangeness of how you would appear.
Yeah.
And, so it's like that's a factor. Did that make sense at all?
It does, but I just disagree with it completely.
What do you do? How can you disagree with it? It's just how I feel.
I just think that let's not. It's fine. Let's go.
What do you mean?
I just think that there's so much pressure.
Oh, you think I've got Stockholm syndrome or something? And I'm
like not even that much. There's just this toxicity that
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah.
Like it's like I have never ever regretted this.
No, I don't.
Like never. Like totally fine with it. Would do it again in a heartbeat. Like, and even I'm like, oh.
Yeah, well, what when you see
You
the
know, like
pushback
it's
against
just a
trans women?
like well, yeah, it's just a really
Yeah,
uncomfortable place to be. And I'm not even a trans woman.
yeah. No, I
Like
mean,
it's just
I no.
impossible. Like if you feel that way, that's cool. But I would wait 5 years and then see how
Oh no, I mean,
see. You know what I mean? Like I just kind of think that you can't, in the same way you can't separate trans from wokeness. I don't think we can
mm,
separate transness from this dialogue. Like I
mm.
just don't
No,
like this.
I
Such a
mean, me
yeah, no, no,
personally. I mean, me
yeah.
personally, and I'm not. I don't mean. I don't feel like this because I'm sort of ashamed or I'm sort of freaking out about the pushback against
Just because you're more
trans women.
internally
Yeah, I just
stable
feel.
within
I
yourself
just.
now.
I just feel like I would be interested to see what kind of man I could be.
Like transitioning has given you the internal resilience to be able to think about, like
I think I've
being
just
optimistic about
matured.
facing that. Yeah.
I've matured as a trans woman. I've matured, but it's kind of like it's this weird journey because I'm still a man, but but you're not just a man. You're something else because hormones,
Yeah, I
physicality, all
think,
that.
yeah.
But
I don't think that we have
I'd
the
want.
language to
Yeah.
actually,
We don't have the
because I'm
language to
definitely
talk.
not, a woman. Like I know
Yeah. No,
I know
we
I'm a
don't have the
female,
language to talk about this.
but I'm definitely not a woman, but I'm not a man
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
And what like they're the
Yeah.
two categories. So what the fuck,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, so maybe I'm just it's a pointless thought exercise that I was just exploring, but I think it's because I'm not scared of it anymore.
yeah.
I'm just not scared of saying, I'm not scared of saying, oh, I wonder what kind of man I would have been. I wonder what kind of man I could be. But
You
I
would be
think
a
in some way,
guru living in
no, but
Tibet.
I think in some way, right, the thing that would I detransition if I thought I could do it convincingly? I mean, because at the moment, because I feel so comfortable internally, and I feel like I've matured as a trans woman so much that that's why I've started to ask myself this question that
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of man I would be, because I'm just not scared of being a man anymore. And I think I clung to the just my identity as a trans woman, I think. But it's a strange place, and I don't think I don't think we should be scared of
Facing.
Yeah, feeding these things because I can't I can't detransition, and I can't detransition, and nor would I want to physically anyway, and I certainly wouldn't, because it would require facial surgery. I'm going to get my breast implants
How
out
did they
anyway.
even masculinize a face?
How do they meet? How do you remasculinize?
I think I might be googling that.
I don't
later.
think you can. I don't think you can. But
Google,
I mean, even if you look at someone like Walt Heyer, he still looks like a woman, I think.
Yeah, he looks very feminine.
So you can't. So we've done this, and we can't undo it.
I kind of resent the up until the point where I saw the Abigail Shrier video, I had no idea that there was an issue. I was, completely happy, completely productive, completely content, not, hurting anybody, not deluding myself about, anything major in my life. Like I was happily moving along. And society has given us the permission to do this. So like I kind of resent the whole like going through the generational the decade kind of, like in the 50s it was this, and the 60s it was that, and the 70s they looked at it this way. Now it must be, it's pathological, it's in trauma induced, it's maladaptive, and it's like we don't know what this is, like in 150 years they could go, oh, that part of the brain that we had no idea what that was about. Oh, that's what it's like. That's entirely possible as well. Like you see people, like there's this dude on Twitter, a doctor on Twitter, that's like, this is trauma induced, it's delusional, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. You're all freaks. And then 2 tweets later, he's like, on a separate subject, he's like, oh yeah, we know next to nothing about how the brain works. It's like,
So listen, I think that I'm intrigued really by what we are, but also I think that it's kind of like a facet of the world that we live in, that we do this, and people do it because they can do it now. They can do it, and so if we're prevented from doing it, knowing that we can, knowing that it's a possibility, that is going to create so much distress in people that really feel compelled to do it. So in 500 years ago or 300 years ago, whatever, when people were doing it, they knew that they couldn't have surgery, so they just did it the best way they could.
They didn't know what surgery was.
Yeah. So is the problem is the growth in numbers being created by the fact that we can actually do it?
I think the teenage problem is created by the fact that they've been fed they're being asked these leading questions, and they know they can do it. I think that's absolutely a factor, like 100%.
But do you know what I feel when we've been talking, I've found this conversation. This is the most interesting conversation we've had. But I feel really dissatisfied now. I feel quite dissatisfied. I don't know, because I feel quite dissatisfied.
Living with the ambiguity.
I'm okay.
I feel empowered by it.
I'm okay with that unknowable aspect of it, but I do think that I wonder. I just my question is, it's unknowable where this comes from, but now I've started to ask these questions about what kind of man would I be. I've started to sort of like consider that maybe this is something that is exacerbated by the fact that we can do it, and I would have just made it work as a man if the possibility of transition wasn't there. I'd have just made it work as a man, but anyway. Okay, listen, that's 2 hours 1 minute.
Time's up.
So that was a good conversation. So do you want to I will link your Twitter and your channel. I'll link your channel. I'll link your channel below though. How many videos have you are you still?
I've just done one so far. I'm kind of talking to a few people.
Isn't it? It's difficult. Yeah.
I don't really know. I kind of have an idea where I want to go next, but I'm kind of waiting on someone because I kind of want to have a chat about something. Yeah, I'm still formulating. I haven't really even notified anyone that I've done it yet. Like there are 2 or 3 people that I've told that I've done it.
It's much easier it's much easier to talk to somebody else, isn't it? And make these videos that way.
Well, because my thinking isn't always as clear. Like when I'm with myself, it's very clear, and then when I'm trying to explain things to other people, like go off on weird tangents and get lost, and then have to come back, and but when you're talking, like I've been talking to someone about how we feel about this issue, and we have very similar experiences, so. Yeah, I'm kind of hopeful that conversation, I'm still kind of planning it out. I kind of have some idea what I want to do, but it's just kind of, like it's just ticking away doing nothing at the moment. That's fine.
So, okay, God, I could go on actually. I just had a question, but I won't because I think people struggle beyond 2 hours. So, okay.
Well, you get emails about that?
No, I don't actually. But
no. 2 hours is as a civilized, like it gets a bit much after that.
Okay, all right. Okay, we'll end it here then. And Bye, everybody.